Hey everybody, welcome to episode 100 of Tactical Crouch. It's me, KickedTripod, joined with Yiska and Volamel and a very special guest, coach for the Philadelphia Fusion, coming back for a second time, none other than ChrisTFer. ChrisTFer, welcome back, man.
It's the third time, I think.
Third?
Actually.
Is it the third? Am I miscounting?
Yeah. This season, I was here last year too.
Oh,
so.
man.
It's always good to be back.
Sure. I'm good at counting. I actually think that this is like episode 104, if I'm being honest, because I think we have an episode 6 that never released.
It's true.
Do
we have that somewhere still?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. But yeah. Anyways, we made it. 100 episodes here. ChrisTFer, welcome back. Congrats, by the way, on a pretty baller season so far.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's
quite the work.
I think when I came on at the start of the year, it was before we'd played any games, and I spent the entire time like hyping up, like trying to sell you on the roster and all the players. So this can kind of be like I told you so.
Kick back and relax. Like, I told you guys, thought it was good.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, exactly. Worth it all along.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
I think I
to be
had
fair,
Fusion top 3.
I remember. No, I remember us being pretty hype on it, right? Like, didn't we talk about Super Team at the start of this with like the caveat being, Sado. We cannot come on podcast and just like blow powder up your beautiful, like that's probably not what you should be doing. No. But I was already admiring that roster from afar. Can I John, can I just hit him with a hard-hitting question immediately?
That's, I mean,
the Marmite question?
In Yiska fashion, why wouldn't we? Yeah, of course.
Is the Philadelphia Fusion currently the best team in the Overwatch League or in Overwatch?
No.
Ooh.
Shanghai?
I appreciate the honesty.
Shock. And it's not because okay, here's how it works in sports. To be the best, you've got to beat the best, right? So until Shock has played big games which actually matter, like playoff games, which we know they'll come to a new level when they do that, we can't say we're better than. Like, okay, if we play them in the finals of the May tournament and then we beat them, we'll allow ourselves to call ourselves it then. But until the team has like beaten them when it actually matters, then as far as I'm concerned, that team hasn't showed enough weaknesses to take them off top spot.
Fair.
Interesting.
Fair enough.
Shock.
Humble.
Do you think Shanghai is better too? Do you put you guys than where you guys are right now?
Oh, I don't know. I have Shock 1, and then whoever beats Shock will be the next best. I don't. It's so hard to judge when you don't even scrim. Like it's so hard to judge. It's just guessing.
Yeah.
Really? That's like, we have built a whole podcast off of that.
Yeah.
Well, drat.
Shoot.
And we got away with it for 100 episodes.
Somebody finally a guest comes on and spits the fact. Like, you guys realize none of it matters. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, well, oh man, we got that hard-hitting question out of the way. Still waking up. I had a long weekend. It was a long weekend of games. There was a lot of games being played. A ton of games.
Busy.
Let's do the normal housekeeping things, and we'll get into the conversation with ChrisTFer. Look at last week's games, and just have fun, celebrate 100 episodes. Woo! So, big thank you first to our patron producers: Battle Crab Pin, Lolshin, Charlie L, Audio Compass, Pork Chop, Sammy, Kasha67, Kuchi Kopi, Shara, Picasso, Nathan, Your Misery, and Hunter Tane. Thank you all a ton for supporting the show. Thank you for supporting us over the past 100 episodes. You're all amazing and beautiful in your own way, and we appreciate the hell out of your support. As well as any other of our patrons, any of our subs, any people who have tipped us during the show. Whether you are currently doing that or have in the past, we appreciate you a ton and thank you all. Whew. All right. Let's do ChrisTFer questions first. What do you think? Yeah?
I like it.
Okay. Echo. Let's talk about Echo a little bit. So Echo's live now. Technically for 3 weeks, but banned the first week. Because
She actually wasn't live at that point, so it wasn't actually a ban. Yeah.
Ban was almost perfect because it meant that she was guaranteed to be in the first week we were allowed to.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on Echo from an Overwatch League coach's perspective, and kind of how it has changed or hasn't changed how you have to prepare.
Well, that's actually interesting because that entire week that we played Echo, that was my job. Like I was on individual feedback with Josh when it came to Echo. So I spent almost the entire week only looking at Echo POV. My main question before she came out was going to be something along the lines of, when Brig came out, the whole infrastructure of Overwatch changed because the dive heroes could never successfully get a target in, right? And my question originally was going to be, if Echo is a dive hero, like if she can consistently kill through Brig, then there's no logical reason why dive doesn't become like the top comp again. But what we found, especially in week 1, it was okay because I think McCree and Widow were banned that week. So we're in this situation where a lot of the heroes that were good against Echo were banned. So that was the best she was ever going to be, and everyone was playing her. And I think teams found out pretty fast this week that once the heroes like McCree that shut her down come back on, it's a lot harder to make it work. So to be honest with you, we barely tried this week to even make Echo work. We felt like from a pretty early point that if teams just ran consistent hit scan, that it was going to be tough. Like the way Echo is played in general is similar to Pharah in that she has to be super smart about the lines of sight she plays. Like even when teams were playing Ashe that week, if Josh gave Ashe 2 opportunities to click on you, you have to assume you're going to die. The exact same way a Pharah has to completely navigate against a Widow, right? You can't, this area of that, we can't go there, because if we give an Overwatch League Widow a chance, your head is going to be taken off. And Echo has that same problems. But Echo also has far better mobility when it's coming underneath or moving around walls and stuff. So to me, the hero is pretty good. The ult's obviously good. I think watching her, she does more damage than almost any hero in the game. The left clicks into the right clicks into the beam is pretty ridiculous damage. But I'm not super convinced with hit scans being as OP as they are in Overwatch at the moment that she's going to necessarily see much playtime going forward unless the bans are right for her, you know?
So you don't think she's going to be kind of a lock for the end of this month with the kind of May Madness tournament? You kind of expect her to be a staple?
The way I'm operating, at least for now, at the May tournament, is that I haven't seen enough reasons to presume that the meta that was pre-hero bans shouldn't come back. Especially when you only give teams a week of practice, it's hella risky to not play the comp. The question is Echo going to be good against that? I dare say if we have an Ana and a McCree, that Echo is going to feel not super great. But also Echo's good against Reinhardt, so maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. Plus, there's a super solid argument that when Echoes have got more experience and more playtime, they can do stuff that she couldn't do on first week of play, you know?
It's kind of interesting to see how many archetypes of comps she was played in. They, of course, dive makes sense, but people were telling me, and to a degree, I think we saw that as well. It's there's even poke comps, or poke pick is a right.
Yeah. We did Orisa Sigma Echo about Echo, so yeah.
So these types of comps coming back, then. What was the DPS you played with Echo? Was it?
I really should know this. It was Ashe 9 times out of 10, I believe.
Okay. Because I heard a lot of teams were running Hanzo in Asia specifically. It's also wild. I asked people on Wednesday, and it felt like a lot of people were flip-flopping very late into the week still with these compositions, because by the time Overwatch League started, my information had almost switched, where suddenly Western teams were running a lot of dive, and to the Asian teams were running these, like for instance, Seoul was running a lot of Hanzo, right?
Yeah.
That is very interesting, and I think this volatility has only been to that point since Echo has been introduced, to just like, looking at how the weeks of preparation go.
Yeah, I have this little saying that I say is like, when there's a set of hero bans, it's either a clean hero ban or it's a dirty hero ban. And what I mean by that is like some weeks the comp you play on Tuesday or Monday is pretty consistent to where you end the week. The bans made sense as you kind of know what's going to be meta. And then a dirty week is like this Echo one where you're theory crafting 19 different comps, and every day you're throwing that one out. Oh, that comp, so bring this one in. And then by like, if you play on Sunday, Saturday night, you're still flipping a coin as to what comp you play on Sunday. And there's been like various weeks across that. I think we had a really nice run. I think the first week was horrific, I think, for us, but I'm sure other teams too. Week 1 was horrific to play because it was so new. And then we kind of had a bit more time, and then we had a few clean weeks. And then I think that week where everyone was playing Torb was kind of dirty. I think, at least for us, we made the decision to play Torb. It might have been in our internal warm-up scrim we decided that we were going to play Torb everywhere. Okay?
Jesus Christ.
So we didn't come in with too much prep for that week. And then we had another few clean weeks, and then Echo was like everything, like complete mess again.
Just to be clear, what does that mean? Like, do you actually conceive of the comp and then play it, or have you scrimmed the comp before that you then eventually decided to switch to?
What do you mean?
In the let's for instance take the Torb case, right?
Yeah.
You said you decided very late that you wanted to run the Torb. Had you run that in scrims before in that week?
Well, that week was pretty unique because I think I've spoken to you guys about the Torb virus, right? I told you about this, about how this week it felt pretty normal. I think that was actually the Chipser week where we had Chipser in and we were playing Doomfist for like the first 3 or 4 days of scrims. It felt like we had a read on it. And then it was either Gladiators or Shock who decided to play Torb. And it was literally a virus that they played it and the other team was like, this shit's good. So then they played it and they multiplied to 2 teams. And depending on when you met a team who'd been infected by the Torb virus, that was what point you got, oh, we're going to do this. So I think maybe we got it we played on maybe Saturday, and I think we got it on Thursday. So we got it with enough time. And then on Friday, we're like, nah, we're not going to change our comp. But then every team, like from that first scrim on Friday where we played against the Torb team, every team that we'd been played afterwards had already been infected by it. And then we played another scrim, we lost, and then we're like, okay, yeah, the Torb's pretty good. And we tried the last scrim, we're like, yeah, Torb's pretty good. So we took out Chipser, and we put in Carpe, and we tried some like Sombra stuff. And then that internal scrim, I think the players who were on the A team that were starting that week said, why the hell aren't we just playing Torb everywhere? This shit's broken. Okay, we do it. And then we were like, okay, yeah, fair enough. And then, yeah, we did it.
Is Chipsa doing a loan installment for XQC for those subs, or is he just going to pay those million subs over time, or is that?
He said the MVP like grand final prize pool, he's going to donate that to the XQC when he gets there.
Fair enough.
Good.
It's coming over time. He just hasn't got it quite yet.
Yeah. Is the kind of definitions of the clean hero pools and the kind of dirty bans, do you think that could be more subjective for the teams? Do you feel like some weeks you have like a clean ban and some weeks, other teams might have a dirty kind of like it's different. It kind of feels like it's not necessarily up to the coaches, but it's, who comes up with the correct answer first or the most correct answer, right?
Yeah, I think I'm the only person who calls it clean and dirty, so this is like very much.
Sure, I mean, but we'll work within that.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. Like I think this week with yesterday's games, we went into. Okay, we have Monday off, so we went into Tuesday's scrims and we said we're going to play some Arista comps at Convict and we're going to try some Sombra Tracer dive. And after one block, we realized, okay, dive for us is the way to go. It makes sense versus Dallas, like as a counter to who they are. And it was working for us, and we literally had an entire week of scrims on the same comp, which is pretty nice normally. That you don't often get that luxury. And I'm sure, and I've definitely seen other teams who were differing in between as the week went on, and then eventually they probably. So for us, it felt a really clean week, and then for other teams, it was maybe like a dirty week.
No, that's a good way to put it. It's interesting on exactly how it's kind of been thrown around, especially on the show, like this week feels bad, or with the performance that they showed, they look like they came to the hero pool late. That was kind of my excuse for Seoul, with their pretty poor week, not too long ago. It felt like they came to this particular hero pool meta kind of late, and it felt like it was a dirty kind of hero ban week for them. So it's a good way to put it. I think I might steal it. That's a good one.
Yeah.
So, okay, we know a lot about virology now through this, like.
Of course, we're all amateur virologists.
Is that a thing?
Has there ever been like a consideration to suppress the R value of your compositions, as in like you keep the scrim bubble very low and contained, and like just like have teams that are consistently good at coming up with meta compositions and leave the other ones high and dry? Have you even ever entertained something like that, or have you thought
we're clearly not as intelligent as you, because that is not even come into our thought process. Like, I think we just scrim the best teams. Like, I don't know. I think that would be stuff like 9,000 IQ shit to only play. I mean, in theory, you could, if we had the luxury of being able to pick and choose each team we scrim, we could pick the innovators day 1 and 2, and then like as the week goes on, like play against more refined teams. But we book our scrims like 4 weeks in advance of like when we play, so it's almost impossible to ever to come up. We just try and pick the best teams we can each week. We don't. I think it's good. It's definitely good to get a variety across the week, because then you have a higher chance of getting the Torb virus early on. You don't want to like self-isolate and then get it later on. You want to try and like embrace the disease as soon as possible. And then if you spread
the antibodies up, understand the virus,
you become immune to it come Saturday. Yeah.
Herd immunity.
I'm so
what
sorry
I learned
for
from
this.
I learned from this is that we got to shut down Shock because they're the super spreaders.
Yeah, it might have been Gladiators. But one of those two teams,
too.
They ate a Torb in somewhere, and then it spread. Like they would have won.
They ate a Torb.
What a save! He dove out of that one.
Yeah.
Very good.
I'm so sorry. I can't tell if
well done.
Being insensitive or just being funny.
I thought it was funny.
I think it's funny.
Okay.
It's a dark time, and sometimes dark humor. It's applicable.
We'll see how the 1-star iTunes reviews feel at the end of it. All right, cool. May Madness. We switched it up here in May, right? We're now kind of in this little kind of pseudo stage tournament format for May. How do you like switching to this format? Is it something that you like and like to see more of, or are you more of a give me the long season?
Yeah, I was someone who I was totally okay with the tournament system. I was initially, and maybe I still am, I was kind of murked that it counted towards regular season games. It felt like there was like one good week on, well, I suppose the lack of hero bans could catapult you out. Like, obviously, I'm biased because I'm now in a situation where I don't even want playoffs. I just want it to be like the Premier League. Whoever has the most points at the end of the season wins.
Just wins. Yeah.
So obviously, as important as the regular season can be, I'm always going to push and advertise for that. But I definitely think that the concept of I think the argument was something like it makes it more interesting and it makes people try harder. But I feel like when it's 150 grand on the line, no team's not trying that week. Like, no one's rich enough in Overwatch to the point where that's not a motivator. And I guess maybe the fans, I don't know if the fans are like, oh, well, this also matters for regular season, so I'm going to watch it more, maybe. But I think the concept itself is really nice. Yeah, like as long as I'm only getting 1 game per weekend, I won't complain to you at all. If you give me 1 game per weekend for the rest of the season, I'm going to shake your hand and I'm going to be okay with that. And I also think, like we said at the start of the show, like for us, regular tournament experience against the big boys, like if we could get something where we had like a monthly game versus Shock and a high intensity like playoff format, that's going to do us a lot of favors as opposed to just playing regular season games and then gets like hit by a truck by like the pressure of playoffs, right? So I think there's definitely like advantages for us in terms of being able to now get regular like knockout tournament like big games experience under our belt.
Yeah, you could definitely argue that a team as green as the San Francisco Shock was at the start of season 2, if they never get to play the Titans in all these stage playoffs, they never develop into the team that they were.
Or not
to
tempered
just, like,
almost.
stomp the final.
Yeah, I think that's super reasonable.
No.
Kind of in that same point with May Madness, and we kind of touched on this with like the hero pools and saying, you guys only have basically a week going into non-hero pools to figure out what that meta is going to look like. As a team that's pretty well situated into getting a bye, how beneficial do you think that bye week is going to be in identifying and kind of figuring out what some of the early innovators are going to do? Do you think that's going to really put you ahead?
Okay, it's possible. I don't know the format of the tournament, but I don't think we get a bye week. I think we just don't play one more game on Saturday. I think we'll still play games on Saturday and Sunday. I think getting a bye will
by day.
Yeah, not even a day. I think we'll still play Saturday. I just think it's like a bye morning. Like I don't know if it's necessarily gonna. I could be totally wrong. I just focused on who I'm playing next week.
Sure, of course.
We'll figure that out later. But I think that it won't affect our practice. We'll get the same scrims as anyone. It just means that maybe we'll have one day where it's less exhausting for us to play like 2 or 3 games on.
Yeah, it looks like round of 12 plays the 22nd, and quarterfinals where the first seed, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd seeds that get the bye will be playing the 23rd. So it is a bye day.
Okay, bye day. But yeah, I think overall,
that's
1 day's
that's pretty rough.
Yeah, it's not a huge benefit.
Yeah. I kind of wanted that to be like maybe changed. I don't know. I like the double elimination. Like I feel like. To ChrisTFer's point, like you made earlier, like giving them 1 week to kind of like shift away from hero pools, like that kind of feels like a hero pool in and of itself,
Well, that's the thing. It truly is no different. It's not like because it's still you have to change all your comps, you have to feed craft new comps, you have to test, you have to go through the same process. If it just switches back to no hero pools, like the only advantage of it being no hero pools is if you give us 3 or 4 weeks on that. Then we get the actual like evolution stage. Like to go from hero pools to another hero pool to no hero pools, you could just throw another hero pool in playoffs and it would be the same for the teams. It's no different for us. Our process is going to be identical. The only thing is maybe we have like weeks 1 through 5 to fall back on, like as a starting place,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Any other questions about kind of the tournament format, or should we talk Titans?
No, I think
let's move to Titans.
Yeah, we can move.
All right. Well, it's in case I'm sure you have not been living under a rock. The Titans, right, have all the Runaways gone at this point. They completely upended. Yep. So Runaway was a really good team in Korea.
Yeah. Okay.
I just learned this last week. Brand new to the podcast and everything.
So you're telling me next week when we're playing Vancouver, it's not the grand finalists from last season?
No, it's not. Yeah. No. Yeah, I can
really?
see. Yeah, interesting, right?
Well, as long as it's not one of the top contenders teams who are better than our teams, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, fair enough. But obviously, with the falling out of the Titans organization and all the players bringing in a brand new roster, there's a lot of optics on Overwatch League teams and the health of the players and the coaches, and the Fusion have been one of the I would say few teams that have actually seem to have done, at least publicly front facing, done a really good job of, players seem to be happy and healthy, joking, stuff like that. You haven't had any MVPs leave yet mid season, so that's good. You haven't had coaches leave and transition to content or anything else. Like you're just kind of trucking along. Can you tell us a little bit about how you think that you guys have been so successful in doing that when it's very clear that the combination of hero pools and COVID-19 is really hitting a lot of these players and organizations hard?
Well, the absolute secret to maintaining a happy roster, and this is a crazy idea, is to win. I know, and it sounds sarcastic, and obviously it is, but it is also super true that when I was on the team last year, we could have a week where we win and we win and we win, and there's no problems. Everybody loves each other. They're brothers, and and then you have a week where you start to lose scrims, and then you lose an official, and everybody's arch nemesis is again or something, you know. And I definitely think that one thing that we try and talk about as a team, and it's really important that we maintain, is the understanding that to work hard and we put in all these hours streaming, like players are playing a ridiculous amount of ranks, like everyone comes to scrims, like has the right energy, has the right focus, like everyone's being super coachable. Everybody understands that it's easier to do that when you're winning, right? And it's really important that we don't take winning for granted and get lazy and then lose, and then all of a sudden, oh no, we have to start working harder again, and then it gets difficult. Like, it's really important that when you're winning, that you keep your foot down on the pedal and you keep pushing forward, right? Because it's never easier to play ranked than when you've just had a day of scrims where you've beaten everybody. That's like, it's easier, it's no problem. It's a lot harder to work hard when you've just had a demoralizing day of scrims where you've lost every map, and then you have to push yourself to play ranked for 3 hours. So I think that's obviously, like, just win forehead is probably the advice I'd give to other coaches, but it is like, it's super important to understand that when you're hot, that's the most important time to keep working hard and to build on it, because this league and esports in general snowballs so hard in the right direction. It's unbelievable.
Do you think that, I mean, it kind of brings up, so I mean, sure, you know, winning is fun. I get that, but so is the league format then, and what we kind of have right now, just overly punishing to like, sorry to say it, but like bad teams? Like, if you're on an uprising, like, is that kind of overly punishing, and is that helpful, or is that healthy if we're kind of in a place where if you aren't winning the game, your kind of mental whatever state is just not capable, you're just not able to kind of stay engaged and want to keep that grind?
So I think there's 2 points I want to make. I think first is I don't think it's necessarily hero pools. But one thing that our league does, which other leagues do, which definitely contributes to it, is we have these massive roster sizes, right? Like in League of Legends and CSGO, teams have the players that are playing on the A team, there's 5 players. And maybe some League of Legends teams have a sub or 2, but that's actually rare in the majority of cases that I know of. Whereas we're in a situation in this league where a lot of teams have a lot of players who aren't getting scrim reps, right? So that's like a huge factor in people burning out and people getting like... And then once you have a team environment and you have a few people who turn negative and turn toxic, that can spread like a virus, you know? And then you're in this situation where there's so many people, like, all people want to do sometimes is play, you know? That's their job. And I think we'd definitely sometimes be in a situation healthier where if players that were on the bench had ways to get meaningful scrim time, like on an academy team or whatever. And then the second thing, and this is not an Overwatch thing, this is an esports thing, but you have to understand the differences between esports and sports is the way we practice, right? Like, if I'm NFL football team, I'm the Philadelphia Eagles, great team. I'm losing every week, okay? Imagine that. I only have to experience losing one time on a Sunday from 3 to 4. I go out there and I lose. And then the rest of that week, I'm practicing, but I'm not losing because we're throwing the football, we're tackling each other, whatever American footballers do, right?
Yeah.
But in esports, if I'm one of the bottom teams, okay, we've just lost our official on Sunday. I'm Tuesday. Oh, I'm now in a scrim. I'm losing. Oh, I've got a second block. I'm losing. And it snowballs and it snowballs and snowballs. And that becomes so much harder mentally. It's easy to practice and think, oh, we're making improvements. And then Sunday, okay, boom, we lost again. Okay, but we're going to do the same. We're going to practice harder. It's really difficult. Like, okay, scrims are just practice, but you can't tell a player who's just has to sit through 2 hours of getting beaten in that it's just practice. You shouldn't worry about the results. It's just not how the human brain works. It's not how competitive players work. So I think in that specific format, it becomes way harder to be a bad team in esports in general. I don't think that's necessarily an owl thing.
Could you ever conceive of a practice environment where, other than of course like having these big rosters and then internally scrimming all the time, is there any way where you could just dry run a lot of your practice and like have drills or whatnot?
We tried it years and years, and like when I was before Overwatch League was even, it was just an idea in Jeff Kaplan's brain or whatever, you know, when we were like in EU was contenders.
It's a twinkle in his eye.
We used to do this thing with NIP, ironically with Seda, who I now work with. We had this idea to run drills, and we would for a scrim block, we would just run first fights at Lijiang Tower, and we'd reset. But even that was like we stopped pretty quickly, and I've never seen like teams do it before. I mean, even internal scrimming, dry runs, there's all sorts of problems. You talk to anybody who has an internal team and has a B team, and they'll tell you endless stories about how difficult it is, especially if you're the players that are on the B team and your job is to play wacky comps, which you've never had any practice of. Your job is effectively just to get run over by the 18. That's what you're getting paid to do, and that's really difficult to like internalize as well. So I don't know. I think it's almost impossible to do anything rather than just scrim. I think what teams like Boston maybe should do, and I don't know if this is something they are doing, is truly just scrim contenders teams.
Is there like a push for? I know, like for instance, that Saita puts out these maps in the workshop.
Yeah,
once in a while.
Like the
Are these
maps
used by Overwatch League players to some extent?
Yeah, he has his like scrim lobby, which almost every team uses, and then he's so good at it. Actually, it's kind of crazy. Like we have it in the Discord, and we would have, especially at the start of the season, Poker would write in, "Hey, can you make me something that like allows me to practice my rocks and eats on Sigma?" And within a day, Saita has this unbelievable game mode where there's 5 different people shooting you, and you've got to shield the Rhine Shatter, then you've got to eat this thing, then you've got to rock a Moira who's ulting in like a certain window. And like I don't know, yeah, like we as a team use that like quite a lot. We ask him to make us like specific like individual practices, and he'll do it in like super quick time.
An enigma. One of these days.
Yeah, really.
One of these days we'll get a hold of him. To your point with the practice and in relation to traditional sports, another thing that, chat kind of brought up, which was a good point, was that, obviously traditional sports doesn't get drastically changed at a fundamental level, seemingly month by month. Overwatch being a larger case study in that, but other games as well happen, seasonal basis, the jungle changes in League or, Dota changes, whatever. Another thing on top of that, though, is that in traditional sports, if I'm, speaking in school here, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, practice is kind of regulated. You don't just get to practice forever. Plus, you're also kind of regulated by your own personal, physiology. You can't practice and over practice because you could, risk getting injured. Whereas esports doesn't necessarily have that. Do you think there's a world where, Overwatch League season 25, we have regulated practice and you're not necessarily scrimming for 20 hours a day, and it's a little bit more pared down to kind of help, player burnout and player mental health? Is that it even a discussion point?
I think if you tried to limit the amount of time teams could practice, every team would break the rules almost immediately behind.
Sure.
Like if I can get an advantage by getting an extra scrim block and I don't tell Blizzard, I'm going to do it. Sorry, Blizzard, but I'm going to do it.
Sure.
I'm not convinced that much of the player burnout has to do with the hectic schedule. Like most teams are playing 2 to 3 blocks. I think in theory this should be what people love to do. Scrimming's the most fun you can do as a pro player. It's the losing which sucks, but I think that I think there is probably some teams whose schedules are like a bit too regimented, like six hours, no breaks, 17 VOD reviews a day. Like, okay, yeah, you're going to burn people out. And like even on our team, it's regular that we do 6 days a week. Like we only have 1 off day, which may be, again, compared to normal jobs or whatever. But also we get like off weeks and we have this huge off season. So like we kind of know what we're signed up for. Like,
for sure.
At least in my opinion, I'm not super convinced that teams like scrimming as many hours a day as they are is what leads to the burnout. I'd probably argue it's the other factors that I mentioned.
The more of like the losing and the low morale that kind of comes from that,
and rotting on the bench and stuff, right?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. The kind of not counter, but a lot of the narrative around that point in particular is that if we were to, let's say, lower the amount of official games played in the season, that games become more impactful. So it kind of doubles down on that low morale, because if we lose, we know that that's going to impact the rest of the season so heavily. So how, in ChrisTFer's perfect world, how do we kind of really tackle this player burnout issue? Because it's really not going anywhere, and we kind of need to put out a fire. So if you were league commissioner, let's say, where would you start looking at it first?
So it's actually I was speaking to Fusions on Boston the other day.
Okay.
And it's and he's talking about like how Boston is in the situation, and it's one thing that this isn't a solution which is feasible, but this would fix it. Like I can't even the league, I'm not even advertising for it because obviously it can't work. But I think the fact that there's no relegation in a league is a huge reason, because I think if you're one of these bottom 5 teams, maybe, what are you fighting for? Like, you really know that at this stage it's almost too late to go in a significant. Like I always go back to English football because we do a league system the way it needs to be done, right? Like there's no playoffs. What's a playoff? That's a dumb idea, actually. That's something that Americans made up because
you watch it.
It's true.
You watch it now.
Why play 38 games and then choose who wins based off like the next 3 games? Like that's total nonsense to me anyway as a European.
Yes.
But we have this thing in football where we have 20 teams, right? And if you're one of the bottom 7 or 8, your goal is to survive. That is the goal. Right. And if you're 19th in the league, you're still working your ass off because you need to survive. You don't want to be relegated. And then if you're in this bracket between 12 and 8, you're fighting for European qualification, which is like the top 6 teams. And then if you're a top 4 team, you're fighting to win the league, right? And every single team is motivated by some sort of goal. And in the league, if you're not one of the teams that's fighting like to win or to like get a good seed in playoffs, it's really difficult to find a genuine reason to work hard more than just your competitive integrity as a person, if that can be said without sounding bad. Like,
Is there a way we could maybe shift it to force mandated roster changes? Because a lot of the pushback that, immediately comes when we talk about relegation and franchise leagues is investors don't want to just blow their money because, you get one too many bad actors and poof goes the dynamite and my 20 million's out the window. Is there a way we could soften the blow so they get to keep their slot, but are forced to make changes, at the staff level, at the roster level, and they kind of have to really change how they've been doing things? Is that, maybe a workaround to kind of have a little bit of both?
Maybe there's a world where you can do some sort of like financial incentive for where you place in the league so that it's like, it's good if you finish 18th, if you earn a decent chunk more money than 20th. And then obviously I think, I don't know. Like, you're right. The franchise system makes relegation impossible. That's a fact. That's like why I said it. But this is, in my opinion, the weakness of the American sports system is that the bottom half of teams really don't have much to fight for.
Totally. I that's tough to even argue that. Like it's 100%, a pro of, European systems. But I don't know if we even in let the bulldog loose on that one.
In our American systems, we're even incentivized if you are losing often to continue to lose, so you get better draft picks. You
get a draft pick, right?
You get better draft picks. You get like you have a lot more trading opportunities on like there's a lot of ways to really turn around that like a bad season, and it's almost worse to have just like a middling season where you finish like bottom, like in like the 25th percentile, right? Where it's like you're not the bottom, so you don't get all the picks and all the perks of that, but you're not good enough to make any playoffs or anything, and you just are kind of like getting quenched there, I guess. American sports do not suck, chat.
No,
damn it if playoffs aren't fun.
Yeah, but then, okay, let's go watch Man United versus Liverpool, and it's going to get 14,000 times more viewers anyway, even at the Super Bowl, like...
Yeah. And then you still have Champions League if you like the knockout stage.
Exactly. They add cups in between the league to where you get those exciting games. And also one benefit that the Premier League does, which the Overwatch League doesn't, is they only broadcast certain games, right? Like if I'm watching the Premier League, I get a game Saturday 12:15. I have a game Saturday 5:30, and then we have Super Sunday where I get 2 or 3 games, and then sometimes they throw in a Monday game as well. But out of the games that I've played, there's only like 3, 4, 5 games which are actually broadcast, which means as a viewer of football fan, I never have to watch Washington versus Boston. No offense.
Sure.
Like I only, and then obviously I'm more engaged because I'm watching like the top teams every week. And then if I'm like a true fan of Newcastle or whoever, I'll go to the games in person, and then that's my way to watch them across the season.
Interesting.
I gotta be honest. If I had less time and I actually wanted to delegate my time towards watching like the most fun matches, I would have a very hard time at the moment in Overwatch League, simply because schedules are not really being kept, are they? with these 3-0 stomps.
True.
And also, very often matches that look potentially very good, absolutely blunder. And then some matches that honestly don't look that amazing, like for instance, let's say Shanghai against Seoul, turns out to be a barn burner. Yeah. So I wake up in the morning, just go like, okay, that was probably a bad match. So let's check the scores. Wait, how is that happening? Right? Like, and that also makes it less predictable. But I guess that it sort of facilitates the VOD structure of this. I still think sports and competition needs to be consumed, or is best consumed live with people to hang out with and to join the discourse of it all. And it's very challenging in that regard. Now, of course, I also wouldn't like what we had before to stabilize like the broadcast times to still have to play format maps like we used to, because that would just like, like extend the drudgery of some of those matches to one more map where it's just like, okay, the last map doesn't even matter. So that team is now even more crushed. Like I also completely sympathize with the broadcasting position, right? Where it's like, what do? You're damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? So, but yeah, that like these are those types of things where we have to sit down in the off season, I think, and just like tinker around with, okay, this is what Overwatch is now, and how can we make it so this is like the best possible experience product, where expectations more often are kept, I suppose.
Sure. I would agree.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts specifically for ChrisTFer, or should we recap some matches?
I think matches are in order.
Matches are in order, and therefore we will tackle them in order and start with the big one. This was a surprising. This was a surprising one. Seoul Dynasty upset the Shanghai Dragons 3-2 in 5 maps. Joe, we didn't see that one coming, dude.
No, at the best, we could maybe assume it was going to be close, but even with that, this is the Seoul Dynasty that just got walloped by both the Charge and the Spark. And, a lot of people jumping off the bandwagon. They assumed, the fires weren't going to be put out. And again, I stand by what I said last week. They were late to the party. They had a bad, hero pool that was dirty for them. And this week they look much cleaner. They look better. And lo and behold, they go the distance with the Dragons, who, stand with Philly and possibly even the Shock as, the best teams in the world, and end up beating them in 5 games. And what a hell of a game. I quite enjoyed it. This week's in general, like, there've been a lot of games. Obviously, ChrisTFer and, the Philadelphia Fusion playing against Dallas was, closer than the score might seem. So if you haven't caught that, definitely pay attention to that one. And Shanghai Seoul was one to watch. I was in the world of hero pools, I don't get a ton of fun out of watching 3-0 this way, 3-0 that way. This one was a good Overwatch. This was a nice breath of fresh air.
ChrisTFer, do you get to watch a lot of these Asia games right now with like when they're being broadcasted?
Not really. It's okay, so a game happens, I wake up on Saturday morning, and then there's games. Like,
yeah,
I'm in a situation where I can watch. I'll always check to see who won, and I'll check comps. But even I see a comp that's new, I'm never going to suggest we play it because we've had no practice on it, right? And then so I can check the scores and I can watch the games, but there's very little productive I can take from it, because our meta is different. We've already finalized, or hopefully finalized, what we're doing come Saturday and Sunday. And then I'm still in a situation where I wake up, I get ready, I have scrims in a few hours anyway, and then so normally if I'm going to watch a game, I'm going to watch it today on my off day, but then I'm just watching it to watch it. And then obviously the problem with hero pools as well is the second that the new bans are in, who cares what anyone played last week? What can I learn from them? It's over again. If we were playing continuously, I would probably study the hell out of a Shanghai VOD to say, is the stuff they're doing. But when it's there's a new hero ban, as much as I should be watching or whatever, it's hard to justify sometimes because it's not hyper productive for me.
Do you kind of miss, watching some of these other VODs and really kind of diving deep on some of these teams? Is that
I mean,
you kind of miss that?
During GOATs, we would do it all the time.
Right.
Shock would play and we'd watch it and we'd
try to dissect and reverse engineer.
Like the replay viewer and we'd watch PVs
Sure.
and we'd try and like get understanding of like how is Choyven so good, blah blah blah. But I suppose in a way being one of the better teams, less footage to copy of the top teams, it's kind of an advantage for us as well, I could argue. Because I think what happened, at least in GOATs, was almost every team was just religiously watching Shock and Titans VODs, they would watch their VODs more than we watch their own VODs, like, oh, let's do this, this is like a good way to do it. Whereas now teams are kind of forced to look at themselves and every team has to do it their own way. Like there's a lot less copying to do, if you can call it that.
For sure.
Well, and with the league essentially split up into two, right? Like there's a lot less incentive for you to be looking at really any of the Asia teams because you're never really going to
play them.
You're not going to play them. So you've almost got like an entirely different league going.
Unless they just jump ship,
Vancouver
just jumps back.
They play this comp. We don't know if they're playing this comp as specific to counter this other comp, which is an Asia-only comp. Like, we can't just blind copy a comp and understand the thought process and the swaps and the way that comp is meant to be played. Because what happens if that comp, but the teams that NA teams play against that, just steamroll it. Oh, we've just wasted our time. Like, each team has its own meta. They play this comp versus this comp. Okay, we're going to swap this hero to counter this, to do this, to do this. It's really difficult to do too much to copy and, like, use the fact that we get to see Asia VODs before our own.
Can I ask about a pattern that's been sort of like going on, where even if both regions kind of can agree on an archetype, and now it's kind of muddling a little bit and the lines are not as clearly drawn, but it felt like North America was Tracer, Asia was Sombra. Like from your point of view, how do you evaluate that? Why did teams in the past not consider Tracer to the point of Sombra in NA? What's the thematic or ideological difference there for?
Yeah, so instead of just the specific Tracer versus Sombra, I think what you said makes a lot of sense in terms of, you talk about the archetypes of comp, right? I think almost every team uses similar terminology. They call it like a brawl comp, which is 9 times out of 10 Ryan with Lucio, and then normally a Mei and Nair or something, right? Sure. And then I think some teams call it poke, we call it spam, which is normally like Orisa, Sigma, and then we play it with like a Zen Bap or like a non-Lucio based comp. And then obviously the dive comp, everyone calls it the dive comp with the Winston Diva, right? The only way for me to explain this is you guys need to visualize that each team has their internal free bar graphs, okay? And this is how good you are at each of the comps. So maybe as a team, Philly, we're like really good at like the Rhine comps, which is funny if you'd considered I would have said that last season, but it's true. And then like maybe like because we had so much time on that, we're like here on the spam comps and then we're here on the dive or whatever, right?
Sure.
What's going to end up happening is that as a team plays more of those comps, those bar graphs increase, to the point where when a set of hero bands comes out, we're going to look at a meta in America especially. Oh, it's a Rhine week, we're going to play Rhine, because every team in America has a bar graph this size of Rhine comps. But the Asia teams, they've played a lot more dive than us, and especially the Orisa Sigma, they really like that comp over there where we would play Rhine comps. Because their bar graph in Asia from what they chose to scrim from an earlier day is higher. So we're going to look at different, and then it's the same for the Tracer Sombra stuff, right? Like at some point, teams in Asia decided to play a bit more Sombra for whatever reason, but their Sombra bar graph is higher than their Tracer bar graph, and our Tracer graph is higher than our Sombra bar graph. So whenever there's options to pick it, it makes more sense to pick which is better. If I explain that,
you've got more experience in one, attribute than the other. Let's say,
and
similar.
You've got a week to practice it, so good luck dedicating 3 days to trying something which doesn't necessarily fit your style at the start of the week.
Reason to switch, to a strength composition and not an agility one if you're more agility prone. Makes sense. 100%. Makes perfect sense. Hopefully, if I'm applying and making the analogy even more convoluted.
MMA is the best analogy for it if you wanted to go into sports. Like if you're a wrestler versus a striker versus a kickboxer, like even your opponent, you think, oh, this guy's kind of good at wrestling, but I'm so much better. My wrestling bar graph it's Khabib level, I'm all the way up here, then I'm still going to do it, even though this guy counters it a little bit, Like, I think maybe that's the...
Makes sense, yeah.
Better analogy.
Styles make fights.
It certainly do.
I prefer a virology analogy, please.
How can we shoehorn that in this one?
Yeah, we need that, actually. Thanks. Yeah. So, Yiska, you haven't talked about Seoul, Shanghai, really yet. In your opinion, is Seoul just that good at double shield, and that's why they win this one, or is it
Yeah. I think if we're staying in the bar chart terminology, I don't think there's a team in Overwatch League that has a wider divide between the height of their bar charts than Seoul Dynasty. And maybe it's Chengdu. I don't know. But Chengdu is like,
I don't even know.
I feel like Chengdu doesn't have three. They just they keep slicing it like thin bologna sandwiches. Like, sure. I don't know. It's but I was of course pleasantly surprised from a point of view of having to watch a great match, but it's also really confusing, especially as someone who's narratively driven and wants to have the stories. And yes, I can contextualize it as they are very good at double shields and not as good at the other stuff, even though that's like Soul not being good at dive when it's profit and gesture. Okay, whatever. But the thing is that makes every hero pool draw so unsatisfying if I was to think from the Soul point of view, where it's like, okay, is double shield now possible? No. And then also if I'm the opponent, I'm just like, whoa, this is not a double shield Soul week. Nice. That's a free win. Like the divide between the, and of course it's also on Soul that their divide is this high, but it's really unsatisfying because there is this random element to it where it determines seemingly so much in terms of what the outcome of a match is. And that is certainly like I have a hate relationship, not even love-hate relationship, just ever since like World of Warcraft in 2009, where people wanted to tell me that randomness is a fun creator. It's not. It's terrible. And wherever it is has something to do with competitive games, it's actively bad game design, masquerading like or trying to overcome like a design philosophy issue. So like these situations, I was actually really upset about how that game went on a macro level, where it's like, okay, this is dumb. Like I kind of want to be able to string these narratives and also, of course, take people on the ride with me for those. Sure. That's kind of my job. And now, like we already know that people don't or think about Overwatch to that nuanced point where it's like, do we now have to create two identities for Seoul Dynasty in order to explain to people that like this is Dr. Jekyll and this is Mr. Hyde Seoul Dynasty? And like I don't know how we frame these things and how we make it palatable and how we make a story out of that, and or if it is even a story, because like what if this completely bungles next week? And I'm not sure. Does Seoul, for instance, play London?
Seoul plays Chengdu, and I believe that's their only match next week.
Okay. Well, Chengdu is always like, I don't mind them losing that hilariously because that's apparently a thing top teams do. But like, imagine them playing London and getting ruffle stomped because they're not playing double shield. That is not satisfying. Yeah. I don't know. That's not what I look into sports for. Like it would be something else if it was like rock, paper, scissors, and yeah, nice. Like there's this team plays this comp, this team plays this comp, and depending on how they like, because of the qualities that these teams have, they play into each other in a way. But have that determined by something they cannot control, it feels rough.
Bad, definitely. I'll be the apologist here for Seoul and say that I still think that week 13 was a messy hero pool. It was a dirty hero pool for them. They came late to the party with Echo. That's why Prophet looked like hot. And it didn't pan out. Everybody was ahead of the curve. They were, lagging behind. I don't think they've just miraculously forgot how to play dive. I think if they were to play, if Asia was to copy the NA meta and every team was to play that, I think Seoul would do well for themselves. due to the fact that you have Gesture on a comfort pick, you have Prophet on a comfort pick, they can kind of form that duo like they did before. And I think it works out just fine for them. I think that week, again, we have to take it with a grain of salt. It still very well could be, you know, maybe their attribute in double shield is just that high and everything else is just delted to the garbage heap, and they really don't. But I don't know if we have definitive information one way or the other. I won't say that, true. You know, I won't pull, you know, oh, Asia sucks and Souls, you know, everybody up, you know, sell your stocks. You know, I don't think it's, you know, the ship's burning necessarily. But it is confusing. I have to agree with that. It's hard to really sell narratives and really paint a fun picture, a clear picture with hero pools. But, you know, we're not going to sit here and bash hero pools again.
Yeah.
ChrisTFer, do you have a feeling which, like, let's say we miraculously could teleport everyone to an island and we could play Overwatch.
Fight island.
Which region, Asia or NA, would do better generally? And let's largely disregard like the individuals. No, let's consider that as well. Of course, it's hard to like aggregate like the archetypical North American team because there's of course a wide divide between Boston Uprising and like you guys. While that arguably isn't the case as much for Asia, but if you, who's the better meta take? Let's say that.
I mean, if I thought we had a worse take on the meta, we probably wouldn't be playing the comps we're playing, right? Like,
I mean, you might because yours have to only work against your meta, right?
I really don't know how you can.
It's a hard question to answer. It's like asking if, you know, Khabib beats Justin Gaethje. Like,
he does.
How do you know? You have to fight. You have to see.
Okay, then let's ask this. Do you think we've gotten any good indication? Do you think there's any telling power in Seoul going over and winning and or getting clapped, or the old Vancouver roster going over and getting clapped? The London. Do you think these are at all good indicators towards scene strength?
Yeah, so you see Seoul come to NA and dominate, but you're 100% right where Seoul dominated on their double shield shit, right? So there's so many arguments where you can, the team that you face, depending on the weakest look, what you said before was 4 million times correct, like 100%. But then like New York at the same time, like they're doing kind of well in Asia, but they also couldn't beat one of the teams in North America. I can't remember who. But then, so there's maybe arguments either way for both regions being better. I don't know. I think if you took the mean, the median, whatever, the middle average, probably Asia is higher. But I'd like to say that we have higher highs and lower lows in North America. I'd like to say that.
I think that's.
But I'm just guessing. I'm just guessing.
Did you see this comment by Super who said like one of those teams is going to get exposed, and of course
that
like
was so interesting to me. So interesting.
Yeah.
Because I had no so whatever he's seen from scrims, we hadn't seen. I think we didn't really scrim so we weren't in a situation. Like I went into that series thinking, oh, this is going to be like an incredible game, and he knew the result before it went in. So he clearly, yeah. I just thought it was really interesting how he already knew the outcome of that game, because even me as an Overwatch League coach, I at least had not seen weaknesses in Soul's gameplay, which made me believe that it was going to be like that. But I'm not exactly watching Asia region with a magnifying glass either, to be fair.
Yeah.
Soul's an enigma. They're weird.
They are an enigma. I think the only other surprising one, I think, from the Asia region really quick is NYXL losing to Guangzhou.
Playing some weird stuff. Genji Doomfist on Kings Row A. Doing a bunch of wonky stuff. Who are you still in? You know, even though Yiska's trying to paint the narrative that everybody's trying, you know, we're done with the who are you on May, guys. Don't worry. We're done here. We're going to play Libero on May. We're going to do good things. Well, I guess, you know, the virus hasn't completely left our system. We got to get a little bit more antibiotics. So we'll have to see what NYXL shows up next week. Is it the one that's trying or the one that's...
I got to say, I haven't watched the match, so I couldn't tell you what
goofy
happened
stuff.
there,
Treat yourself. Film a reaction video because that's a special one.
All right. Okay, well let's move on to the NA matches, and I think the big one, or one of the big ones, is Vancouver's first week, right? Not the strongest showing. At the same time, I don't know how much you expect. Like, they're not even
exactly.
They're not a full roster. They didn't pull that full contenders roster over, so there is like synergy. There's also, I'm sure, just a lot of turmoil and like, you know, in the matter of 2 weeks, going from, you know, chilling in contenders to oh yeah, you're playing in Overwatch League now, and like getting all that infrastructure over. But Joe, guys, what did you see from Vancouver this week? Any bright notes, silver linings in any of that?
I mean, I think they have like a good core to work around. We're hearing reports that like not even all the players are, you know, within North America, so they're playing with a lot of handicaps. Like you said, this is, you know, a brand new roster kind of piecemealed together. We kind of have to give them time to figure things out. Or getting through the season, so it's not like they have the most time in the world. It's kind of what you'd expect. What is there really to say? It's 1 week on hero pools. If hero pools really taught us anything, we need to really see like a wide variety of data sets to kind of really look at, okay, like where is this team strong? Where are they weak? Losing to Washington and Florida definitely aren't strong points, but there again, you know, it's their first weekend. You've got to assume, you know, these are, you know, green players. These are rookies coming into the Overwatch League. Even though it's online, it's still pressure, right? On top of handicaps, on top of coming in mid-season. You know, I cut them a lot of slack. This isn't the best showing in the world. This isn't how you'd want to start, you know, Vancouver V2, but what do you do? I can't really bag on them. You know, they're trying their dangest, but it's tough. That's not how you want to open up, for sure.
This is the interesting thing. Did you read the Hafikul tweet, ChrisTFer? Mm-hmm. The one with the top NA teams could beat, I'm not sure what range he gave, but like a couple of VAL teams. How did you receive that? Did you think that was possible, or?
But it's Hafikul, so that's how it go. I think so. Astro said this to me this week, and I actually think he's 100% correct. When I spoke to you guys earlier about the concept of like losing and losing and then losing and losing, these top contenders teams can not mute. Sorry, my speaker just went off. Sorry, it's confused me. Can beat the bottom Overwatch League teams. Because they're not boomed and the Overwatch League teams are boomed, right? And then they're in this situation where if you're the top of like the cycle in contenders and you're winning all your scrims, they can absolutely go against the teams in Overwatch League who have already given up, who are already like, there's no motivation, there's internal problems. But what I'll say is this, these top contenders teams, get them in OWL, give them a few months to scrim the OWL teams. It's really difficult for me to sit here and tell you that being paid to be an OWL makes it harder than to play in an unsalaried contenders team, because it obviously feels really disingenuous to tell us, oh, these guys who are getting paid to play have it tougher. But I promise you that the fact that rosters are relatively fixed in contenders, if you have a bad player, he's gone, right? And I think that allows like a constant rejuvenation of honeymoon periods, right? Like, okay, like they're able to continue to do like that. And B, like I said, like they're winning their scrims and the Overwatch League teams are losing theirs, and they obviously have to scrim again. No one's arguing that the top contenders teams are going to beat the top Overwatch League teams, I hope. And then they're in this situation where I think you take any contenders team, and I think if you give them enough cycles of getting smashed in scrims, then they're going to realize, oh, it's really difficult to live in a team house with players that when you're losing all the time, and then you have this external pressure of having to play against the best teams in the world and having all of these people tweeting you and all these people watching your games. Like, obviously they would prefer to be paid and be in the Overwatch League, but there is also a lot of pressure which being in the Overwatch League forces you to have, which you don't have in contenders. And that's honestly true. So I think like teams like this, the top contenders teams, if you put them in a match against the bottom Overwatch teams right now, for sure they could win. But I think if you give them an extended period of time to get out beaten into them, then you start to see that they probably don't hold up as well.
towards this concept of confidence, or like, I understand there's a lot of like the social dynamics of the team as well, but one thing that's always frequently talked about in CS, for instance, is that this is also a game of confidence, and it's not really as much about, I think, the team dynamic, even though that of course also plays a role, but it's like you fly into the angle differently when you're confident that you're the best player in the world, right?
I can't. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story that proves you to be 1,000,000% correct, okay? Story maybe isn't the right word, but okay. Over the course of our season, we are now 12 games, 11 wins, right? And there was a few points during the season where our confidence wasn't at 100%. Going into our first games at the Philly homestand, we really weren't sure if we were going to beat Washington and Florida, and that's like the God's honest truth. Like, our scrims hadn't been good. We really didn't feel like we'd had our comps like properly figured out. And what happened was we have a really close game against Washington, but we beat them. Okay, the next day we feeling better. Okay, maybe we're not so bad. We beat Florida. Okay, and what I'll tell you is that the starting Monday, the next week of that scrims, we were so much of a better team because we'd won the games before. Our confidence was higher. Everybody was bought in. It was like watching a better team. We hadn't coached them any differently. They hadn't learned anything differently. We weren't playing against different teams. We weren't playing different comps. But we were such a better team on week 2 than week 1. And the only reason for that was because we won week 1. I promise you, without a shadow of doubt, if we lose to Washington on day 1, our season right now looks like totally different. I think that like we would still be good because our players are too good to be like a bad team. But maybe the Florida game is close. And I think it's really difficult to argue we would beat New York the week after if we'd had a week where we'd lost the games on the first week, because then the confidence we'd down, would be playing worse, the players would be less bought in. And the exact same thing happened in hero pools, right? Like, we have the first week of hero pools where it was a train wreck, it was horrific. We lose to Paris in that really close series. We then have 2-week break, and scrimming on off weeks in hero bans does more harm than good. It's so difficult. Like, oh, but we're not, these aren't even our bans. So we have a horrible week of practice where the results don't go well. People aren't feeling good. It's really difficult. Like, I don't want to like put on a 7-hour VOD review of a meta we're not going to play, because even I know that it's really not a productive use of my time. It's better for us to chill. And it's really hard to say, okay, guys, we're just scrimming this week, just chilling, like staying warm. It's difficult to get people to try. So again, our confidence goes down and down and down. And then we have the Torb virus week versus Washington. So a lot of things going into that game, we didn't feel at $1 million, right? But okay, we realize we win 3-0, even playing the Torb. Like, Carpe has an unreal game on Torb. And all of a sudden we're like, oh, okay, yeah, we are a good team. Don't worry about it. And then that next week we have like the toughest week that we've had all season, which is Atlanta and Paris in the same weekend on a different hero ban. And we beat both teams purely because we won the week before. It wasn't because, like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, it's And then sometimes, like, I've seen us do it to other teams. I've seen teams like Atlanta and Paris, who I consider to be really, really good teams. I've seen us beat them one week, and then their performance goes the other direction in the week after, because it snowballs in the other direction. And obviously, over the course of the season, if you're a good team, it's not like every team just goes up or down. It's obviously like a bit of this, but there is actually 100% a factor in like the confidence. And it's why I really think, like, if I'm busting up Rising head coach, I really think I'm canceling every scrim with an Overwatch League team. I'm scrimming contenders teams. I'm saying, fuck their meta. We're going to do the contenders meta. We're going to scrim. We're going to come out of this week with a decent scrim percentage, and we're going to go into them, and they're going to have no idea what we're playing. We're not going to know what they're playing, but we're going to be confident that we can beat them. And I truly believe that. I know it's so borderline disrespectful to say that you guys should scrim contenders teams, but I do think that confidence is going to be like such a significant factor that I don't know. I don't know how to say it without being really harsh to them or really like bigging us up, but like, it's not productive for them. It's not productive for them to scrim us. Do you know what I mean? Like, it does more harm than good, even though we're like, they can learn a lot from us in theory, right?
Sure. But you're not learning if you're so bought out, right? Like, you're not learning if you're, in bed sick. You have to be able to kind of be healthy and have a good healthy mindset to be able to learn and get something from those scrims.
Yeah. I think if you're just getting boomed to this point, it's really hard to reframe what success means. Sure. I think there's the way, for instance, one thing that was super interesting to see is there's this documentary about TI. And what's it called again, Joe? So people can look
True Sight.
True Sight. and they follow both teams. And OG has what I assume also to be the result of, and the name escapes me. I'll probably remember in a bit, but.
You're talking about like the Astralis performance psychologist?
Performance, yeah. She's the performance coach for Astralis and for OG. And before that, I think she worked with another esports team that also just like overperformed ridiculously.
Sure.
And the pattern that I picked up, which was a little weird, like I didn't know the guy. I wasn't that much into Dota, but the team captain of OG in the match they lost went like, so basically what happens is they do the ban phase, and apparently it didn't go that well, and they play the match and they lose it, but they have some win condition where it's like where he reframes it and says like, for how the bans went and how all of that shaped up, like they are at their wits' end now. Like we figured them out in the game. Now we know that it's over. They're totally boomed. Like we basically won the match by XYZ happening here, and that was our win condition. I think if you're like a team that usually wins, this reframing can work. Of course, I totally agree. That probably doesn't work for Boston Uprising, where you celebrate like, I don't know, like having a crisp execution against the San Francisco Shock, but still getting 0 points is probably not going to be able to, that you can reframe that as a success, right? But in general, yeah, it's also the pattern, and this is like talking a little bit out of order, but like I remember when I got global in CSGO, the way I did that, and like I used to play with the same group of friends, and then like everyone's was like, yes, it wasn't running. And then I was playing with lower ranked friends. I was just chop fragging, flying into every angle, every time, like just like 30 bombing every game in these lower ranks. And then I played like that at the higher ranks, and it still worked somehow, right? And I think generally like this winners mentality thing is actually, there is something, I'm sure there's something physiological about this, where it's like almost hormonal, what it does to your cognition and eye coordination and whatnot, where it's just like, that's the magic juice that you want to get at, right?
I think it's something that jiu-jitsu does well, is that at least I've heard, with the little bit that I've dived into MMA, is that, you kind of roll with people who necessarily aren't at your level, but you learn how to finish them and do that quickly and build up that confidence. I think it's something that I believe former Quake, legend Fatality, I think Thorin has a great interview with him. He talks about doing that quite a lot, practicing with people not necessarily at your level and just building up confidence and being able to fly into those angles, like Yiska saying, and like what ChrisTFer's saying. It's Chad kind of nails it on that. You have to believe that you're going to be able to win that shot when you kind of turn that angle. Maybe a reason why I think the leading theory on why Babyface kind of doing as well as he is, I think somebody who just can't not be confident and is just exudes confidence, and that's why he can come onto the server and just take every angle, take every duel. He knows he's going to win.
Yeah, I mean, I think the True Sight example is really good. Like No Tail and Seb are the greatest emotional leaders I've ever seen. Like those two carry that. I have no doubt. I have zero understanding of Dota, but the way those two are as teammates carry that team to be the best in the world without a shadow of, like, I don't know. I'm sure they have the carries elsewhere.
Sure.
But those leadership roles are so important in any sport. And Yiska, me and you have spoken about the book, the captain's class, right? And it's this book which goes in, the concept is like the greatest sports teams in history. There's one consistent thing, and it's not having the best team or the best player or the best coach. It's having like leaders within the team who are so, that fit the criteria of great leaders, and that's what takes a team from being a good team to a hyper elite team. And I think you saw that with OG, and I think, like, I don't know if Babybay's at that level, but I think you're 100% right. Like the team clearly feels more comfortable when they have this confidence leader playing. Toronto, I don't know if we're going to get to it. Toronto versus Shock. You saw the same thing. Tell me that Toronto did look a million times better this week.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Cruz is an unbelievable in-game leader, an unbelievable like team captain, and Fefe talked about it. That was all that was holding like Toronto back from being a good team, was probably just like a proper natural born leader. And almost immediately you can see Cruz comes in, and they were very close to beating Shock this weekend.
I think that's a good transition point. Looking at Toronto, do you think that, is there a way, kind of a two-part question, is there a way that you feel like a team can lose in a good way to kind of build a little bit of morale, a little bit of confidence? And do you think this is a kind of turning point for Toronto in that same way?
If Toronto haven't taken more positives than negatives from this weekend's game, then I don't understand what's wrong with them. Like, objectively, they've played against who I've already said that I consider to be the team to beat in Overwatch. And if Moth doesn't get that boop, who knows how this series looks, right? Like, they're a miracle play away from overturning a 5-minute deficit on a payload map, compared to last week, where they were a team who, or the like previous rest of the season, who looked pretty like lost at times, right? Like, they have to take positives from that. If they don't, then their mentality's in the wrong space for sure.
That leads me to the question: who's the emotional leader on the Philly Fusion?
Carpe is the one, and actually the reason. Are we going to talk about our game at some point during this?
Yeah, we can. Maybe we can.
Sure.
No.
Sure.
Yeah. Yes, we will.
Okay. If we do, I'll tell you then about like why Carpe won us this week's game. But Carpe, and then I think Astro is also. I mean, Astro is so young, but 100% that guy has like leadership material written all over him. Like, I can already see. So I think between those two, like, they're probably like our emotional leaders.
Let's talk about your game against Dallas a little bit. And so Dallas is in an interesting position just as a team in general. I feel like they've got some really exciting players on their roster. They haven't, I would say, totally strung together probably the results that they are hoping for, but they seem to be a team that has to be taken pretty seriously, I think, or they'll sneak up on you.
We treated them with 100% respect this week. We think they're good. I think they've had a pretty tough schedule, and then like various situations. I think they're a better team than their record shows.
Do you think that they're a team that is very much like how Yiska's propagating soul? Do you think their attributes, their bar graphs are a little skewed in one direction?
It's super
maybe towards
possible.
like a dive.
We believe internally that yesterday we played the best Dallas Fuel possible. Sure. I think that meta this week, if I was to design a meta which would allow Dallas Fuel to excel, Tracer, Sombra, and then the Moira as well is like really, really important for them, because I think it highlights their strengths and maybe paves over their weaker areas as well, right?
Sure.
So I think that we realized that if it was a Tracer, Sombra, Mirror, that's when their bar graph is at its highest. And the only time we've lost this season was on Winston comps, right? So we definitely had a point to prove of like beating one of the best dive teams on dive. Like, that was definitely like an important thing for us to prove that we're not just Ryan May one tricks, you know?
For sure.
Yeah. Go ahead, Yiska.
So, can you explain the mechanic by which Carpe won this match?
Yeah, so you guys all watched the game, and presumably, like most people, I think the analyst desk was talking about it as well. There was like the concepts of map 1 and 2, we were like struggling, especially with our EMPs and stuff, right? And what ended up being was that we were playing in a way where we were kind of allowing their Winston to jump into our team, and then we were kind of like reacting to that in an attempt to like to eat his dive and then like try and punish him. That was kind of like most of the game plan going in. And what Carpe does, and this is what Carpe does on our team that nobody else does, was after we lose first point Blizzard World and the series is looking pretty bad, actually, Carpe realized that we needed to make a swap. And then he started to say to the guys, no, guys, we have to go first. We have to be the one that jumps into them. This is going to make everything easier for us. And he emotionally dragged the team from like a slower play style into a faster play style. That wasn't necessarily what we'd practice, but I think he recognized during this game, if we keep playing like we are, we're going to lose this game. And then he was like he was the driving force, said, no, guys, we go first, jump first, jump first, jump first. And the way that it changed it is that, like, imagine dive v dive, especially with Lucio Moira, which I hate, by the way, but especially with Lucio Moira, like, it's not a dive comp because the Winston's not flanking. You're not diving anyone. It's just goats with Winston. It's like Moira needs to be removed from the game. But okay, we're playing Winston, D.Va, Lucio, Moira, and these are the two comps. Sure. If their Winston jumps into ours and he places his bubble here, this is where the fight. This is the battlegrounds. The octagon has been made. And what it means is if their Winston jumps onto us, it's really difficult for our Lucio to boop their Winston back and speed Alarm and himself away to be out of distance of the EMP to the point where we can like consistently counter it, right? And what you saw in the first was that all of their EMPs, because they were jumping first, Astro couldn't outplay the beats, and people were saying, "Oh, Astro's beats look funky." That was why. And at the same time, it's really hard for Hisu to get EMPs if the fight is on top of us, because he's going to EMP their tanks, and their supports, they can sit on the outside and just watch the EMP go, "Oh, hi, nice EMP, beat." And that's how, in the first two maps, every single time they were countering ours. But when we dictated the tempo and we went first, we were doing it to them, right? Like, we jumped in on their team. We placed our bubble around their tank. Sada was doing a good enough job at not dying, like, not being too aggressive. And what that was, we were watching from Astro's POV a lot. He just watches it, and he just watches our tanks and their tanks fight, and he sees their sombrero, "Hey, guys, EMP." And Astro's like, "Okay, beat." Every single time countered it, every single time. And then it worked the exact same way for Hisu, where maps 2 and 3, all of his EMPs were getting value, not because he was playing bad in the first games and better in the third, but just our concept of game style changed, the point where our beats and EMPs, we started to win those ult fights. And once we started to win those ult fights, the game looked like a million times better for us, I felt.
No, 100%. I think the one big question there that kind of pops in my head is, does it feel awkward, or do you feel that the players feel awkward trying to take fights in maybe areas that haven't been drilled or haven't practiced? Do you feel like it's shoehorning it in, or do you feel like gaining the proactivity, gaining that extra space, being able to dictate where the octagon is, even though it might not be in the most optimal place? Do you think that that's a better trade-off, or is there even a trade-off? Am I completely off base on that?
So I think we're not the only team who talks about this, but I think over the last 2-3 weeks, we've maybe made like a slightly more conscious decision to try and play with a bit more aggression, because I think one thing Krusty said to Carpe on Team Korea was that a slower, methodical playstyle wins you regular season games, but a high-tempo, aggressive playstyle wins you playoffs, right? And I think that highlights why Shock dominated playoffs, whereas like New York consistently have been like winning regular season games, right? Because New York are known for that specific style. And we definitely thought that we were never a passive team, but we were never a full-on engaged team. Like, especially when we played these rank comps, we were pretty methodical about the way we played. Like, if they have these ults, if they have these ults, this is going to determine if we're going fast, slow, forward, back, upside down, whatever it ends up being, right? And we've definitely, over time, we're trying to see if we can like slowly push the team into an aggressive play style. But at the same time, like, we actually, the Winston stuff was something we talked a little bit about internally this week, like about if it's better to do both ways. And like, some people thought yes and some people thought no. We also had we really tried to make Ana work this week, because we thought conceptually, if we can get Alarm on Ana, we can make a gap between the flex supports. Like, the problem is, like, if it's not without being disrespectful again, like if it's Crimzo versus Alarm and they're both on Moira, the gap that they can have from their levels is, there's only so much that Moira allows you to do. Whereas if we could find a way to get either Alarm or both of them on Ana, we felt like we could showcase the gap between like Alarm and, to be honest with you, every flex support on the planet. That was an idea that we had trying to go into it, but it was one that in practice, it just felt like Moira was the better hero. So we had like real problems trying to figure out like if we wanted to play to our styles, which gave us the most win conditions in terms of making gaps between players, or if we just play what's best. And then also the playstyle, we weren't quite sure if our Winston could consistently jump in and survive against like a Moira dive. But like, that's why Carpe is our leader. That's why he's so important to us, was he was the only person who recognized it in the middle of the game. This has to change or we lose.
I remember going into the season and looking at like the big news report, that ESPN put out, like, oh, Carpe's, 3-year contract. He's going to be the franchise man. We could see the skill, but hearing the intangible puts a lot more perspective on that move. And I think
we said it to him. We said, like, if you're going to sign the contract and the size of contract that we have to have more out of you than just being the best player in the world, which is a ridiculous statement, but he has he has to step up and be a leader and be able to do stuff like that. And this season, he's been terrific at it.
So by saying that, do you mean that he kind of moved into that role? Is that something that he's been working on?
He's never been a quiet player. Like, he's never been a player who goes with the flow. And Carpe is like hyper competitive as a person, but he's also like, we definitely wanted him to be someone who was like able to keep the team like positive and moving forward when things were getting bad. Like, I think sometimes in the past, Carpe has been a player who, when things are going bad, he allows it to affect himself. Whereas this year, he's grown as a player to the point where things are going bad. He's the one that says, not today. Like, we're gonna win. And I think Astro had a similar moment against Atlanta. I don't even remember his boop on Ilios. But when he came in for that map, because we were 2-0 up and we went to 2-2, like the team morale was at like an all-time low. Like everyone was really quiet. We thought, we fucked this game. It should have been won. And Astro came in because he was on the bench for maps 3 and 4. And he said, no, fucking just everyone just listen to me. I'm going to tell you how to play. We're going to like play aggressive. We're going to win this game. And he almost alone, not just with the boop, but with the energy he brought in, turned that series, and we won game 5 purely because of Astro. And that's why you saw all of our players after the game tweet like, oh, thank you, Astro, for the carry. Thank you this. It wasn't because of the boop. It's because I think it's crazy to think about that this 20-year-old English guy has come into a team of 5 Koreans who've just lost a few games, and that it's Carpe, it's Fury, it's all of these legends of the game, and he has the confidence to say, no, you guys just fucking listen to me, and we're gonna win this game. And he takes it over, and that's why I love the guy. Like, that was the moment where, for me, I thought, okay, that this guy is not just a good main support, like he's special, actually, like the best, I think.
It's crazy to think that
I didn't know I could be sold more on the Fusion.
The power of winnable is actually nuts. Like, it's basically what it boils down to, right? Like, if you can make people buy into that and then also click pretty well onto heads.
Yeah. Changes everything.
It's the magical word. It's
the emotional side of sports is as important as anything you do in terms of just clicking heads. It's so, I can't overstate. Like, it'll be the same in every sport, but just the mentality and the attitude of believing you can beat this team changes everything.
Yeah. That kind of takes me back in that same way, like the belief structure of winnable takes me back to like Vancouver's just seemingly like impossible fights that they would just turn around last season, where they would just alt, and somehow they turn a 2v6. And it's like, but how do you do that? It's like, now it's like maybe the trust and the camaraderie and that belief of yes, we can win this if we just execute nearly perfectly. That's insane. I think it's something that I hope we can start to build on in Overwatch, and we really get a grasp of and build towards, and not just, good players, playoff seed. We look at like the mentality of things, and it's more emotional than it is necessarily 12 hours a day, scrim, VOD review. It's not the mechanics necessarily as much as it is, emotion and morale, like you're saying.
Yeah. And I think it's also fair to say this is where the organizational structure comes in.
Sure.
And allows these breeding grounds of just like that mentality to rise, right? Like, I'm currently watching the Jordan documentary on Netflix. And that was basically like one of the major points, or just points of discussion, where this really not that well liked GM said like something that was misinterpreted, where it's like he put the organization over the players, but what he meant was that championships are won with the organization, which I don't think is really a controversial statement at all, right? Like, if the infrastructure is not there, like we saw what that can do, right? So I think that's really good to see how just everything works in tandem. And also at a time of crisis, this kind of like the ability to make sense of the chaos of an organization. And it's always, for instance, like you pointed it out, Joe, in your piece about the Valiants, like someone like Mike Schwartz, who just has like a sound head and can make the hard decisions and can bring in the guys when he believes into something and can pull like the parachute if things aren't going right. That's the type of stuff that maximizes the value that you, or the resources that you have, right? So from that point of view, it's also super important. And then that's also a guy I want to talk with eventually, is the performance coach from LA Gladiators, where we talked about with Curry Shot, how his mentality was kind of like so harmful to him, and how this guy helped him to kind of break out of that mind frame and actually make him step up and be more productive with less hours after the fact, right? So this psychology, it's almost like the software we're running on, right? And if that's not efficient, you can throw a lot of processing power at it, but it's not going to work, right? You can have the best sensors and everything, but as long as the software sucks, it's not going to help you.
Yep.
That's, by the way, if I'm keeping count, the fourth metaphor we found outside of
Yeah, we're all over on it today. Chat, we're getting to a point where we're going to be wrapping up pretty quick. So if you have questions for ChrisTFer,
do we want to talk a little bit about?
We're definitely not done. So yes,
a little bit more in depth about Toronto and Shock. Like, did you possibly think this series could be competitive to that point? Like, is that something that
you saw?
Maybe did you scrim Vancouver possibly? Sorry, Toronto.
We didn't scrim Toronto, but we scrimmed Shock a few times. So I can't comment too much. But you saw Choyobin's scrim, his tweet presumably about how like they'd had a rough week of scrims. So I mean, so we definitely like. I don't know. I'd be lying if I said that I expected much more than the Shock Frio, because I feel like they're the type of team, regardless of how their week goes when it comes to game day. I think they're gonna. And maybe like these are the scenarios where if they had their leader, which was Sinatra, maybe we've talked about leadership so much, but we haven't necessarily spoken about how much losing him could affect their ability to, in big games, to perform, regardless of his mechanics or not. Because I think, to be honest with you, Rascal, Striker, Architect, on a purely mechanical level, I don't think they're necessarily going to miss Sinatra. I think they have enough talent in those other players where it's like, oh no, like we have to play Striker and Rascal this week. How on earth are we going to be fine? Okay. I think they're still going to be okay. But it's super possible that if he is the leader, which I think numerous people have come out and said he was, that's going to be something where they look to miss. And in the book that I mentioned, that's what happened a lot of the times to these sporting dynasties, is when their captain retired or moved on, they still had all their star players, but their performance dropped. So maybe that's going to be the factor which affects Shock, which people haven't spoke about enough.
And I know, like, at least from a perhaps more cerebral point of view, leadership is happening through Moth, who sort of acts like an extension, but like as it was also described in captain's class. Like, for instance, the German World Cup team in when they won the World Cup in Brazil, they had a dual system where one of them was the official captain, Philipp Lahm, and then there was also an emotional leader in Bastian Schweinsteiger, who was the type of guy, like famously during the final, he took it on the chin, or like I think it was the forehead, and he was legitimately bleeding, but he was still fighting and dragging the team behind him just with his fighting spirit. And I always felt like that duality of leadership, of just like the strategical part and the intellectual part, and then the emotional part and the ferocious and the human element, winnable. That to me was more than Sinatra, and I wonder if anyone on that team can now step up.
Like in-game leadership isn't itself a skill, but that's completely different, like you said, to emotional leadership. Like being able to track the ults and call the right plans and make us do the right things is important. But that's not the same as having someone who's going to say, all right, listen, guys, we can do better than this, or whatever it ends up being. Like that, it re-energizes the team when it drops. They're two totally different things. And if you have this person who can do both of them, like sign him to a 20-year deal.
Yeah.
20-year deal confirmed. The longest in Overwatch League history.
Overwatch League season 20 confirmed. We're here for 20 years, boys.
Yep.
And I'll also say it's not surprising to me that a lot of these players that come off as or are emotional leaders in their prior life took that energy to solo queue and were very toxic. I think that's just where the energy goes when you don't know how to frame that in a constructive way, where you have that passion in you that you cannot lock behind any filters that keep it. And I'm not talking about the worst toxicity, but someone that is like, if someone talks dumb stuff in solo queue, they are on you, right? Like that is coming out. And I think we saw a lot of these types. I mean, as far as we can go back to Overwatch League, Overwatch history, like for instance, someone like this was also Taimu, right? Yeah. Like for Envious during these times, where it was like he was also the leader for them to that degree. Like, of course, it doesn't have to come from that place. I guess there's also a more pure energy if you want. Someone like a Sabiol becomes
someone like a runner.
Someone like a runner, most definitely.
Yeah. Again, somebody who I think is emotional, not necessarily, in-game leading, right? That there's that distinction, like you mentioned.
I feel like they still have that inherent spirit. They just have a sophisticated outlet and have looked inwards, like have self-reflected to the point, or had great parents, let's be honest, where that is coming out constructively very early on in life, where they don't necessarily have to hone that as much, but actually can pull people behind them and are just like the center of a group, so to speak, who make the plans, who like organize, who also realize when someone's off from a social standpoint. And yeah, I think this is also really hard to come by, and I imagine very hard to scout, right, ChrisTFer? Like
almost impossible unless you've worked with him. Like I knew about Astro's ability, like I saw the potential of him to be like that because I've worked with him across multiple teams before. But if I'd never had that luxury, I couldn't watch his gameplay and make any predictions about like how he is as a leader, as a person.
Yeah. Even like we like for a lot of the time, for instance, Dogman was clowned maybe for his individual play in the beginning of season 1, but I can also totally see how he has contributed, especially during the time where Baby Bay wasn't part of the starting roster, right? And it is that's a little bit of the problem of opacity of these qualities, right? Like where it's like, unless you're like, and that's why these comm checks also probably work pretty well in these moments of just excitement, or like when a big play happens, just to get like a little glimpse of, okay, who's calling what here, and who's calling the shots, and who's taking responsibility for all of this, right? And I honestly, I was thinking about this today. I would love to see moments like these in positions of defeat, and how these leaders deal with those situations and what they say to their team then. And yeah, I think these are the important stories that sports also needs to tell to a point, because it enriches the audience's understanding and experience. And it's so highly applicable to practically every human interaction you do. Like everyone works in a team somehow, somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to sort of like by osmosis get an idea what these personalities are. And also, let's be honest, like some of it is just inherent to their nature. It's like Mother Nature gave them the drive to be that person to a degree very early on, or they were guided into it or whatever. But I think it's really hard to teach someone to be more like this if there wasn't already an inclination towards that point, right? Like there are very timid players that really enjoy being led. And I think to a certain point, people will also find that while we talk a lot about freedom and freedom of choice and whatnot, that people actually also enjoy someone else taking the reins and you having the capacity to do other things and focus and temporarily give the responsibility to someone else who believes that you can do it to a degree, right? Mm-hmm. But it's hard to tell these stories in a believable and authentic way because you probably don't want to give away comms. Not too much, right?
I don't know if I would care if teams saw comms. I don't think teams. I think the league doesn't want to. Whenever there's comm checks, our team never. It's only the stuff they talk about pre-game. You never hear any in-game comms because it's always too much swearing and stuff. I don't know if it's necessarily PG, but I would. Yeah, I think so too. I think that you're right. Like the behind the scenes, like of teams when they win and they lose, and the comms behind them, or like I'd love for them to go back and capture the moment where Carpe flicks the switch or when Astro flicks the switch. Like that, to me. If there's ever a documentary that's about sports and actually has behind the scenes and locker room stuff, I've seen it. I'll watch it all. I'm watching the Jordan documentary. I don't care about basketball. I don't understand it, but I get to see how the greatest minds work behind the scenes. That's so interesting to me. It's more interesting than any basketball gaming could be without even a shadow of a doubt. And yeah, that's why I think the True Sight, when I watched that first True Sight documentary, the one not of this year, but the one before, I was blown away by it. It was like one of the most interesting hours of my life. To see like how these two leaders had dragged the team with all the history like of like the ragtag nature of like building the roster or wherever it ended up being, and like all of the failures they had in their career, but how their emotional leadership dragged them in the biggest stage in esports to a victory was an unbelievable watch. And I think that I think it's the most interesting aspect of sports and esports.
I'd love it if we, not to completely yoink True Sight from Dota, but if we could get something like that for, maybe even last year's final. And hopefully this year's, knock on wood. That would be some incredible content.
Yeah.
The problem is like the good content has to be the unfiltered.
Yes.
And then when those moments are happening, people don't want to be filmed. You almost have to film people when they don't want to be filmed to get actual content, which is like truly worth watching.
Yep.
If you only film people when they're ready, like we are now, to be on a screen, you don't necessarily get to see like the truth behind it,
Yep.
But when you film people at their worst and even if they don't want to, they let the cameras roll, that's when it's like truly interesting.
You get the full picture, you get the bad, the good, and everything in between. That's
And that's also why I like the little halftime talk that Uprising had.
Yeah.
Where it was so interesting and so powerful to me. Where it was like, have you seen that? Like they had a little.
They do on Twitter, right?
No, they actually during the live broadcast. So they had from the last week, they sent in a recording of what happened when they were 2-0 down. Okay. And talking about the strategies and just like I think they were sitting on a couch, and it's just like you're watching this and you realize, okay, this is currently the worst team in the Overwatch League and they're already 2-0 down. This is the lowest point right now, and you're being part of it, and that to a large degree feels powerful as a message to just, and of course. I would never force teams to give up that information and that privacy. But if you're willing or able to submit that to the Overwatch League, I think it adds so much to the experience. And just like seeing the faces of the player and what it means, it's like, even if you don't understand Overwatch, it's the same thing about like watching the documentaries and whatnot. It is about the human experience and just like getting an idea that, that this matters, right? Like, it's about something. It really doesn't, like, esports is the vehicle that it comes riding in on, but like whatever is inside that load of like this payload is like that's the juice, that's the stuff you want to bring to people. And if you can do it via video games that is engaging, that's the sugar for the medicine, that's the stuff, right? Like that is I think the message. And if we can do that, of course, like goof off, And I enjoy Sideshow and Brandon as much as the next guy casting, especially like the toilet bowl matches. Mm-hmm. But to then also have this serious part, because it is serious, like it's the life of the best parts of the life, the most productive, the most influential on the future of their life of young adults, together very often, like locked into a house, and to just like be part of that intimate moment of just like people really, really trying. When we're being honest, that many people don't try to that extent. It's such a powerful subliminal message that I think if we can transport that to people, I don't think we ever have to care about viewers again. Like that's where they come. People don't need to understand Overwatch then, right?
If you start to understand the importance and the difference between a week when you win and a week when you lose, if you understand how it affects every single thing you do for a week, the games matter so much more. Like if you can actually, you have no idea the difference between going to sleep on a night after beating Dallas and a night after losing to Dallas. Everything is different. Like my day off right now, it's a lovely day. It doesn't even matter what I do or I don't do. I'm going to be in a good mood because yesterday, you know, I remember when we lost playoffs last year and we truly done everything we could to win that Shanghai match. Like I'd every hour of every day for like 3 or 4 weeks in a row we done, and then to come away and to lose is truly one of the weirdest and the worst feelings you can ever have. To actually try your absolute hardest and not be good enough is pretty horrific. But then when it works the opposite way, it's a feeling that most people, I think, don't get to experience on a regular basis. And that's what's so good about competition, is because we do every week. If we've actually worked hard, we get to experience the spectrum of emotions on a level where normal people can only like get it here. And our job allows us to experience at either spectrum.
100%.
Dang, this has been a roller coaster of a show so far. I love it.
The end, didn't it?
I love it. I know. I love it. We do have some questions from chat that are just kind of a smattering of different ones that I think we're going to lay on you. And then, you know, Yiska, Joe, of course, if you have any other questions, just pop them in. This one's from Picasso. What can you tell us about determining when we see Poco versus when we see Fury? Like, this happens all, like, we got this question like 8 times. Picasso was the first to ask it, but
yeah. So with the we are probably a team that we have probably done the best job of roster management of any team in the league, I would say. I think all of our pieces have played, and almost all of them have played like relatively substantially, right? Chips have been the obvious exclusion. And I think with at least the 4 DPS, and I think with Boombox 2, we now have a role where we understand if the hero bands and the comps are a certain way, these guys are going to play. But with Poco and Fury, they are both so good at every single hero. Their attitudes are both so good. They both work so hard. There isn't a logical reason to choose between them. Truthfully, it's actually that difficult. And we're kind of just in a situation where we just want both of them to play because it's not fair on the other one. And we're in a situation now where we don't lose any performance value if Poco plays or if Fury plays. I think they might be the 2 best off tanks in the league. Like, I think you throw Choyobun into that mix, and I truly think that between Choyobun and Fury Poco, I think you have the 3 best off tanks in the league. And it's unfair that we're hoarding 2 of them. And it's a really difficult thing to do as coaches, is to find ways to play them both. Because you can't bench Fury for the season for no reason. You can't bench Poco for the season for no reason. And there's no significant hero pool problems. Like, both of them play everything at an unbelievably elite level. Like, it's the one where we haven't got what we would consider a logical solution. And I see it sometimes on Reddit. I'm like, oh, so it seems like Fusion are using Fury for this reason, and Poco has this role of the team. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds, no, we just, here's the coin. All right. Like,
it really is that simple.
It's really difficult. Like, I can't think of a solution which doesn't feel unfair to somebody that isn't the one we're doing right now.
Totally. And the big theme I think with this podcast has been like the management of morale. So in that same light, how do you take the person or the flex tank that isn't playing and keep them bought in? What is the secret sauce with that?
Well, it's super important that they know if they're not playing this week, that doesn't reflect that they're not going to get to play this week, the next week, sorry. And it's really what's good about most people on our team is they see that. So right now it's close to 50-50 who's played this far in the season. I think Poco had the vast majority of the start, and then Fury's had the most recent games. So they're pretty close to 50-50. And I think it's really important that both of them can hand on heart say, okay, I've had a significant reason why my team is first place in the standings. And if they can do that, then they're going to be bought in. They're okay to sit out a week because they realize, like, they're both mature enough to realize, well, Fury should also be playing. Like, they don't watch each other in scrims and be like, that guy's bad. Like when Poco watches Fury, he obviously watches him and is like, okay, yeah, this guy's really fucking good, and obviously vice versa. So like that's the important thing to do, is to have them both understanding that they were both incredibly important into our success this far into the season.
And thus, who are you, Joe? Are you hearing this?
Fair.
All right, next one. This one's from Eric. He asks, Philly will probably get a draft. We'll get to draft a tournament opponent for the first round. Any early ideas on who you might want to play?
We've been talking about it this week, but we have genuinely been very seriously considering just picking Shock straight away as like a
the Moxie pick,
a statement of intent, you know, to go out there and like prove. We ain't scared of you. Like, we're gonna prove we're the top dogs. But I don't know if I don't know who's gonna end up making that decision.
Sure.
I don't know if that person. It's easy for me just to say, oh, let's do it. That'll be sick to do, and then obviously the logical conclusion is to pick someone else. I'd love to do it, but I'm not.
How would it influence your mental if you were to fall short then?
It's a huge.
I mean, you're playing the best team, right?
It's like losing to Shock isn't necessarily something that can affect your mental, but knowing that we finished quarterfinals because we were confident is going to do more.
Right.
So maybe the upsides don't outweigh the downsides.
Fair enough.
I think that's the great part about these systems, where you give the teams the chance to be able to do something like that, to kind of not, play for the content, but if that kind of sends the message to the community the best way, like you give them the chance to be able to make those decisions. You give them some sort of agency to say, you know what, I am going to make a statement of intent. I want to play the best team, and I want to show everybody that we're the best team in the world. And then you go out there and you do it. You cruise to the final. Granted, maybe the final then isn't that interesting, but that's the type of stuff that really, again, to Yiska's point, that's that kind of, human element that gets people bought in. That's that excitement factor. That's what we need. And I'm glad that this is a test run for more. So hopefully we get more of this.
I also think so. Someone said in chat that if the Shock beat Atlanta, the Shock will also
they might not be
pickable.
Yeah,
right.
But still, it's good to know. Like, if you can pick your opponent right now, you're like, give a Shock. I love that.
I mean, I can tell you, like we've spoke about, like the winnable mentality. I can tell you with hand on heart right now that within the Philadelphia Fusion, if you put us against the Shock tomorrow, we truly hand on heart believe we can beat them and we will beat them. Like that's like the confidence and maturity we have like right now. Like there is no fear. Like I've said that they're good, and to be the best, we've got to beat the best. But we 100% without a shadow of doubt right now in a position where we believe we can do that.
Great, love it. This one's from Atomic Skull. And this is an interesting one. One of your fellow coaches, Moby Dick. We don't hear a lot about them. What can you tell us about them? About the type of person they are, what they kind of bring to the coaching staff. Just shed a little insight on that.
Yes, so Moby does the vast majority of the individual coaching, obviously. But he doesn't only work with Korean players, he works with Western players too. Like he's always doing individual coaching, and KDG is always doing team coaching, and I kind of like float around. Like sometimes if there's a week where we're playing like 2 different archetypes. There was a week where I took over team coaching for one comp and he did team coaching of the other comp. And it allowed us, like, I didn't even watch the scrims where we weren't playing my comps. I just focused on what my job was, and KDG did his. And then sometimes, if like this week we only played one comp, so I like fell back into individual coaching with Sado or whatever it was this week. But Moby, like as a person, is like super kind natured. He's like extremely influential within the Koreans. Like he's like a super positive person. Like he's not necessarily the guy that like gets angry with everybody, but like at halftime yesterday, like Hizu was obviously like his EMPs weren't getting value and he was feeling the pressure a little bit, and Moby was like a really significant factor in arm around the shoulder and like being able to like calm him down a bit. Oh, you're okay, you're okay. So he's like extremely good at that.
Interesting. I like that.
Different side, yeah.
Joe, did you see any other questions from the chat that I missed? That were good?
Just some general hero pool stuff that I think we've definitely talked about. If you have any more, get them in there. Another kind of pseudo same question, but not same question. I know that you've definitely worked with KDG in the past. Could you kind of give a similar description of how KDG's been with this team? Maybe where he's grown or what he's done in particular to really boost this team up to being arguably, I'd say, the best team, at least in North America and at least in the western half of the world.
So KDG is one of, I think in esports you hear it a lot. Did you ever read the thing Doublelift said ages ago or like recently about like the problem with coaching in League of Legends is the players are all like smarter than the coaches at the game.
Yeah.
And that's like a super consistent problem in like a lot of games. And KDG is like one of the few coaches who I can hand on heart says understands and works harder at Overwatch theory than players, and genuinely understands the game better. So it's really nice for us to go into a coaching system where this year we have like the head coach is genuinely like an Overwatch encyclopedia. Like he's so unbelievably smart at how Overwatch needs to be played. And that's like that's really important for players to know that the person that's like calling the shots is spending every single second of the day thinking about it. Like the man, I've said it before, but the man's work ethic is truly on a level which I'm not convinced is humanly possible. Like how he only does Overwatch. Like he goes through the entire day of scrims and then he watches every single minute of every single VOD back numerous times, right? And like I could quiz him and say, Thursday at 3 p.m. what was the team fight? And he'll be able to tell me because he knows it inside and out. And I think that like that's one really important factor in coaching that sometimes, and what we've spoke about this podcast, gets overlooked is just how much he understands Overwatch, which obviously should sound obvious, but he's really important. Then he's a bit older, and he's definitely, I don't want to say, he's definitely someone that the players are scared if they're misbehaving to get on the wrong side of, which sometimes is a bad thing, but is a really, really, really important thing in coaching. Like what's good about our coaching system is we have like, I don't want to say that he's like the bad cop and Moby's the good cop or whatever it ends up being, but we have relationships within the coaching staff where if players need a hug, we have people who are really good at that. And if players aren't working as hard as they need to be, he's good at telling them that. And he doesn't do it all the time. Like he's nice 9 times out of 10, but he has the ability, if you're not like doing your job, he has the ability to tell you that, which as a coach is as important as anything that needs to be done. Like I think if you look at all great coaches across all sports, they all have the ability when the team isn't at 100% to tell them and to get the best out of them.
That's also a thing that I remember from my like we had to do mandatory military service, and one of the best leaders that I probably will ever have in my life, I remember him saying that a lot of people just think that being unpredictable is somehow like a good quality, but it couldn't be a worse quality for a leader, because everyone in the group needs to understand this is the border, and if you step over, every single time you will get clapped for that. That's the barrier. If X does this, you get clapped. If Y does the same thing, you get clapped for it, right? And just be in that regard very consistent and fair. Right, but like that's basically where respect and like consistency comes from, and that always stuck with me. Just to think, yeah, okay, like having consistent rules, because everyone's like, like how everyone's like a little Death Note Edge Boy, where it's like, I want to be unpredictable and different. Yeah, no, it's a terrible quality for a leader.
Sure.
One of the reasons where we've continued to win is because KDG refuses to let us like get overconfident or to slack off. Like every week he pushes us as hard as the week before, and it's like there's no complacency allowed in our team. Like he still refuses. He doesn't believe that we're going to win the game next weekend. He's going to like make us win the game next weekend. Like there's no such thing as like taking his foot off the pedal, and that's like one of the reasons like why our season's been so good so far.
Interesting. I think that's it. Is that it?
I think so. I think it's been an absolute banger.
It has been
easily one of my favorites.
Yeah, for sure. Chat the whole time has been like, can we just have ChrisTFer on every week, please? Thank you.
I would do it, I would do it.
Boy, you be careful.
We'd love to have you.
Yeah, we seriously would. Yeah. Thank you everybody in chat for celebrating 100 episodes with us. We appreciate you all so freaking much. Hope you enjoyed this special one. ChrisTFer, big thank you to you for hanging out with us, and congrats on the first half, or I guess we're a little bit over halfway of the.
Yeah, we're about halfway. Yeah,
a really successful first half of the season, and hopefully we get to see you in playoffs and grand finals at the end of it, and get to hoist that trophy, and yeah, it'd be great. So before we get out of here, ChrisTFer, for you, any shout outs, message to the fans, talk about where people can find you if you want them to find you, that kind of stuff, follow you and all that good stuff.
I literally don't tweet, so don't worry. If you want to follow me on Twitter, feel free, but you won't get anything good out of it because I won't tweet. Just keep supporting Fusion. Like there's nothing else I want from people, really.
Cool, will do. I maybe I can finally. I've been burned buying coaches jerseys in the past because Curry shot as soon as I bought mine. He left. Yeah, and so. I don't know. Do we get a ChrisTFer jersey? Is that what we do? We'll see. Tune in next time. We'll see if we've got one. Yeah, it's one of those. Oh yeah, we should ask this. Are we when are we gonna see Chips on the Overwatch League?
You dodged it.
What are we gonna get? When are we gonna get
the 2-hour podcast about a Chips a question?
Yeah, when are we gonna see Chips on the Overwatch League stage?
Well, did anyone see my interview with Zoe yesterday?
Yep. I think
I told everybody.
He definitely laid down some intent. Apparently, next week will be Chips a week.
All right,
and it's against the Titans, so
awesome.
We'll see. Great.
All right, I look forward to it. Let's close and get out of here. Big thank you to our patron producers. Battle Crab, Pin, Lotion, Charlie L, Audio Compass, Porkchop, Sammy, Kasha67, Coochie Kopi, Shar, Picasso, Nathan, Your Misery, and Hunter Tane. Appreciate you all a ton. All of our patrons, all of the subs. Big thank you to Pin to Paper, who gifted 10 subs during the show. We appreciate you a ton, Pin. Thank you so much. And big thank you to Hunter Tane, who is brand new patron and a patron producer. So appreciate all of you for doing that. If you like the show and want to support, there's there's multiple ways to do that. Number one, subscribe right here at twitch.tv/KickedTripod. We record Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at noon. Fridays being Spike Drop or Valorant podcast. Second thing, follow twitch.tv/KickedTripod or come in for any of the live shows. We're really close to partner. And we're trying to do that last push so we can get partner on the channel, get some extra emotes, because the new emotes are live and people really like them, and we'd like to make more of them. From there, it is Patreon, patreon.com/tacticalcrouch is where you can go for that. And if you want to do something for free besides lurking on the live shows, is leave us a 5-star iTunes review, and we'll thank you on the next show. So... that's it. Joe, shout outs for the week. Where can people find you?
As usual, you can find me everywhere on the socials at Volamel. That's VOLAMEL. Not entirely too sure what we're doing for Overwatch this week, but definitely Overwatch content coming. Couple ideas tossed around in my head at the moment. going to be doing a profile and review of one of the teams in Valorant that I think is definitely one of the more promising ones. So be on the lookout for that. And just tune in for Wednesday when we look at Week 15's matches, and then on Friday when we dive more into Valorant with Spike Drop. I think it's episode 7-ish. So yeah, 6. Tune in for that. And 6 was close. But yeah, just thanks for the support, everybody. It's been a fun and wild ride with the podcast, and cheers to 100 more.
Yiska, what about you, man? Shout outs for the week. Where can people find you?
I just wrote or released a piece like an hour before the show, and it's about how sports history is really not that kind to the first losers, so the people that lose finals, but there's a specific roster that comes with the baggage of history of its ownership, that despite losing the Apex Season 3 finals, they are now incredibly influential. Almost all of them are considered elite players now. Of course, I'm talking about Kongdu. And I kind of looked at that development, how we're now in 2020, almost 3 years after the final, and almost all of their opponents are now gone, other than Toby. And how still Kongdu, Panthera around the players like Rascal, Birdring, Void, Fissure, and Luffy are still at the upper echelons of Overwatch, and how potentially they might have a hand in winning all consecutive Overwatch titles if Shanghai was to do it this season, with Birdring doing it the first season, Rascal doing the second. So dope storyline that developed there, I think. At GG Recon to read that.
All right. Well, there you have it, chat. Thank you all so much. We'll be back after the music for our post show to hang out. And we thank you all for being here. I hope you enjoyed this episode 100, and we will see you guys next time.